Hi, in this video I will reseal the transaxle from my Porsche 944. I will remove the gear carrier in the rear cover and replace all the oil seals. At the end I will replace the shifting linkage and intermediate shift lever with a short shifter kit from only 944. Welcome to 944 Restore. The first thing I'm going to do is remove both the drain plug and the fill plug. Here I am removing the mount brackets. I have an early 944. If you have a late model, the brackets are located on the top. Next to go is the shift linkage. There is a bolt here which holds it onto that shaft, and then there is a bolt on top. Remove both of those and it should slide right off. I am now removing the top detent. You should do this before removing the selector shaft. Otherwise, the spring will drop into the case. This is the cover for the selector shaft. There is spring-loaded tension against this cover, so loosen the bolts a little at a time. You should now be able to push on that other end and slide the selector shaft out. Use a punch here to keep the drive shaft from rotating as you loosen this bolt. Alright, now that we got the easy part out of the way, it's time to remove the carrier from the rest of the case. After loosening and removing all these bolts, the Porsche manual says to remove these two pins that are holding this case on there. I didn't have any luck removing those pins, so I just started hammering away at this thing until it came loose. Here's an example of what those pins look like. This case is sealed together using Loctite 574 and takes quite a bit of banging before it breaks free. You can now more clearly see those pins holding on. Just keep banging, it's the easiest way to get this thing apart. Alright, now for the rear cover. It made sense to me to put this thing back together using a bolt or two. The rear cover also needs to be hammered off, so I wanted it to be stable. The first thing that needs to go is this end cap. I just hammer in a flathead screwdriver and then you can just pop that cap off. This rear bolt will spin the input shaft, so you need to hold the input shaft and then use something like an impact wrench to break it loose. Now it's time to remove these hex bolts and remove this rear cover. There is a race at the back here that's holding this thing on, so you have to keep banging until that race falls off. Here you can get a better look at that race and how it fits in. The rear cover has a magnet that needs to be cleaned. I wasn't able to remove the pin that's holding it in there, so I did the best I could using a magnet, wipes, and some brake cleaner. Now I'm going to remove the differential cover, loosen the bolts, and then this is also sealed, so you have to bang on that tab to break it free. The differential cover also has a magnet that should be cleaned. Using a seal puller, I'm going to remove this oil seal. And remove the oil seal on the other side of the case for the differential. It was definitely a lot easier to remove this input shaft seal with the gear carrier out. This seal is for the selector shaft. The seal puller wasn't the best tool here. It's a really small seal. I struggled with this one quite a bit. And with that, disassembly is complete. Here's a look at what's in the Transaxle gasket kit. I'll have a link to the product in the description below. The first piece to be reassembled is that rear cover. I'm going to put Loctite 574 around this side and also the gear carrier side. There's a paper gasket that goes in between. I forgot the heat shield, so I'm going to loosen 2 of those bolts and then put that heat shield back on. Now I'm going to put that rear cover race back on. The workshop manual says to heat this thing up and then you can hammer it on using like a soft mallet. I noticed some Loctite when I took this bolt off, so I'm going to add some blue Loctite when I put it back on. Torquing this bolt down was a challenge because it spins the input shaft. I had this idea to put an old clutch disc into a vise in hopes of keeping that input shaft stable. It actually worked out pretty well. I'm going to hammer on this input shaft oil seal using a steel driver. You have to be careful because this seal does not sit flush. It actually has to go back like 1.5 millimeters. This is a pretty good shot. You actually want to drive that seal just past the beveled edge. In order to reassemble the gear carrier in the case, we're going to apply Loctite 574 once again. Be careful with the input shaft because there's now that oil seal and you don't want to damage it. The kit provides some gaskets for these stop bolts, so I figure we might as well replace them. The old gaskets were stuck on there pretty good. I used a wire wheel and a Dremel to remove them. Apply more Loctite 574 for the differential cover. Install with the magnet facing towards the bottom. When installing the differential cover, the magnet should be at the bottom. A few of the bolts for the differential cover are shared by the mounting bracket, so I'm going to go ahead and install that at the same time. It's a snug fit, so I used a rubber mallet to knock it in place. And then install the mounting bracket on the other side. For the oil seals for the drive shafts, the Porsche manual states that grease should be applied. I think it's a hold in the spring when you knock it in place. The oil seal for the differential cover can be driven in until it hits the stop in the back. Insert the drive shaft and install that single bolt. On the other side, there's no stop for that oil seal, so you have to be careful when driving that one in. This gives a pretty good idea on how far to drive it in. Now we're going to install the oil seal for the Selector Rod. The workshop manual recommends adding grease to this seal as well. Now reinstall that selector shaft and that cover. When installing this detent, I added a little bit of grease just to keep that spring in place. The cap for the rear cover can just be pounded on using like a plastic mallet. Install that lower drain plug and then fill her up. Per the workshop manual, I'm going to add 2 liters of gear oil. Finally, install and secure the fill plug. Next, install the mounts to the bracket. I have an early 944. If you have a later one, yours will look different. And success! Our gearbox is reassembled. The shifter and linkage assembly was in pretty bad shape, so I went ahead and ordered a replacement from only 944. This one gets fully torqued down after you align it with the shifter. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any torque specs, but I did crank this one down pretty good. And that's it. The short shifter is installed. I'm just going through now and making sure each gear can still be selected. Thanks so much for watching, and if you like what you see, please hit the subscribe button.